The night I found the severed finger wrapped in $100 bills inside what I thought was the most generous tip of my waitressing career, I realized my biggest problem wasn't paying rent anymore. Because when Kim Jae-woon returned to my diner 3 hours later, bleeding from a knife wound and carrying a briefcase full of evidence that could topple half of Los Angeles's criminal underworld, the first thing he said wasn't "help me." It was "you shouldn't have opened it," in a voice that held equal parts apology and terror. What I didn't know was that the finger belonged to an undercover FBI agent who'd been feeding information to rival gangs, and finding it made me the only witness to a murder that 3 different crime families would kill to cover up. What I definitely didn't know was that falling in love with the man who'd accidentally made me a target tends to complicate things when every law enforcement agency in California wants you dead or alive. My name is Keisha Williams, and I've been slinging coffee and dreams at Mel's all-night diner in Koreatown for 2 years, long enough to recognize the difference between late-night truckers, insomniacs, and the kind of customers who paid in cash and never seemed to sleep. Kim Jae-woon fell into that last category. At 34, he had the kind of understated elegance that belonged in gallery openings, not vinyl booths under fluorescent lighting. But he'd been coming in every Tuesday night for 6 months, always alone, always ordering black coffee and pie he never finished, always leaving tips that made my shift manager suspicious and my student loan payments manageable. Tonight felt different. He sat in his usual corner booth, but his normally perfect composure had cracks in it. His expensive watch caught the diner's harsh light as his hands trembled slightly around his coffee cup, and he kept checking his phone with the kind of nervous energy that suggested bad news was coming. "Another refill?" I asked, approaching with the pot of coffee that had been my constant companion through nursing school and would hopefully carry me through medical school if I could ever afford to apply. "Please." His English was perfect, tinged with an accent that made even simple words sound like promises. "And Keisha?" The fact that he knew my name shouldn't have surprised me. It was on my name tag, but the way he said it, careful and intimate, made my heart skip. "Thank you. For the service. For treating me like..." He searched for words. "Like a person." "You tip like a person who deserves good service," I said, refilling his cup. "Speaking of which, you're being unusually modest tonight. Where's my ridiculously generous tip that makes my manager think I'm running some kind of side business?" For the first time in 6 months, Kim Jae-woon smiled. Really smiled, not the polite mask he usually wore. The expression transformed his face from handsome to devastating. "It's coming. But tonight's tip is different." He pulled out an envelope, thick and white, expensive paper that felt substantial in my hands. "Don't open it here. Wait until you get home. And when you do..." His expression grew serious, almost pained. "Be very careful." Before I could ask what that meant, the diner's front door chimed and 3 men walked in. They moved with the kind of coordinated precision that suggested military training, and their eyes scanned the room like they were mapping threats and exits. Jae-woon's entire demeanor shifted. The vulnerable man who'd been thanking me for basic human decency vanished, replaced by someone cold and calculating and absolutely dangerous. "Time for me to go," he said, standing and dropping a 20 on the table for a $4 check. "Remember what I said about the envelope." He left through the kitchen, which should have been against health code regulations but somehow didn't surprise me. The 3 men followed 30 seconds later, moving with the same eerie synchronization. I stared at the envelope for the rest of my shift, curiosity and caution warring in my chest. By the time I got home to my studio apartment at 3 a.m., exhaustion had beaten curiosity into submission. I tucked the envelope into my purse and crashed on my couch still wearing my uniform. It wasn't until noon the next day, when I was finally coherent enough for coffee and rational thought, that I remembered Jae-woon's strange warning about being careful. I opened the envelope at my kitchen table, expecting maybe a note with the usual generous tip, possibly his phone number if I was lucky. Instead, I found $1,500 bills wrapped around something that made my stomach lurch and my medical training kick into overdrive. A human finger. Severed cleanly at the second joint, preserved in what looked like medical-grade solution. A man's finger based on the size, with a distinctive scar across the knuckle and a wedding ring that caught the afternoon light. I should have called the police. Should have dropped the envelope and backed away and pretended this had never happened. Instead, my nursing training took over. I examined the finger with clinical detachment, noting the clean cut, the preservation method, the details that might matter if this was evidence. The ring was engraved, "To David, forever yours, Sarah." My phone rang before I could process the implications fully. "Did you open it?" Jae-woon's voice held no greeting, just urgent concern. "What the hell is this?" I whispered, staring at the severed digit on my kitchen table. Proof that I'm not the only one being hunted. That envelope was meant for someone else, a rival who's been feeding information to federal agents. Opening it makes you a witness to something that people are willing to kill for. People like you? The silence stretched long enough that I thought he'd hung up. People like me, yes. But not me specifically. I'm the one trying to keep you alive now that you've seen it. Why should I trust you? Because I'm about to ask you to trust me with your life, and I've never lied to you before. His voice dropped lower, more intimate. Keisha, there are 3 black SUVs parked on your street right now. Men with guns who think you know more than you do. You have maybe 10 minutes before they decide talking to you isn't worth the risk. I moved to my window and peered through the blinds. 3 black vehicles, just like he'd said, with occupants who looked like they were waiting for something. What do I do? Pack light. 1 bag. Cash if you have it. Leave through your building's back exit in 8 minutes. There's a blue sedan in the alley, get in. How do I know this isn't you kidnapping me? Because if I wanted you dead, you'd already be dead. And because... He paused, and when he spoke again, his voice held something vulnerable that made my chest tighten. Because I've been coming to your diner for 6 months not for the coffee, but because you're the only person in this city who looks at me like I'm human instead of dangerous. 7 minutes later, I was running down a back stairwell with an overnight bag and $300 in cash, my hands still shaking from touching evidence of a murder I didn't understand. The blue sedan was exactly where he'd said it would be, and when I slid into the passenger seat, Jae-woon looked different than he had in the diner. Gone was the expensive suit, replaced by dark jeans and a black t-shirt that revealed the kind of lean muscle that suggested regular violence. A gun rested in a holster on his hip like it belonged there. "Buckle up," he said, already pulling out of the alley as the sound of splintering would echoed from my building. "They just broke down your door." As we drove through LA traffic, Jae-woon explained the situation in clinical detail. The finger belonged to Agent David Morrison, an undercover FBI operative who'd been feeding information to the Bratva to expose Korean organized crime operations. Morrison had been discovered and executed, but not before he'd passed crucial intelligence to someone in Jae-woon's organization, intelligence that could destroy half the criminal enterprises on the West Coast. The envelope was supposed to go to my second-in-command, someone the FBI thought they could flip. Instead, I grabbed the wrong package from a dead drop, and you got evidence that makes you a target for federal agents, Russian mobsters, and half my own organization. Why are your own people after you? Because they think I'm the leak. Because they think I gave Morrison the information he was feeding to the feds. His jaw tightened. They're not entirely wrong. We ended up at a safe house in the hills above Malibu, a glass and steel structure that looked more like an art gallery than a hideout. The view of the Pacific was spectacular, but I was more concerned with the armed guards patrolling the perimeter and the high-tech security system that seemed to monitor everything. You're bleeding, I said, noticing the dark stain spreading across his left side. Knife wound from this morning. Occupational hazard. My medical training overrode every survival instinct screaming at me to run. Let me see it. Keisha. I'm a nurse. Well, almost a nurse. Pre-med, actually, but I've been working in emergency medicine for 2 years. Let me see the wound. Something in his expression cracked open at my insistence, vulnerability seeping through his controlled facade. You want to help the man who got you into this mess? I want to help the man who got me out of a worse mess. I gestured toward the living room. Sit down and take off your shirt. The wound was deeper than he'd admitted, a 3-inch gash along his ribs that had been poorly bandaged and was showing signs of infection. As I cleaned and sutured it with supplies from the house's surprisingly well-stocked medical kit, Jae-woon talked. He told me about inheriting his father's organization at 22 after a car bomb meant for him killed his parents instead. About 15 years of building legitimate businesses while maintaining the underground networks that funded them. About the impossible balance between honor and survival in a world where showing weakness meant death. Morrison approached me 6 months ago, he said as I worked. Said he had information about human trafficking operations the Bratva was running through our territory. Children, Keisha. Kids being sold like merchandise. My hands stilled. What did you do? I gave him everything I had. Names, locations, financial records. Everything needed to shut them down. His voice held no regret, only grim determination. I knew it would make me a target. I didn't know it would make you one. Why didn't you just eliminate Morrison when you found out he was FBI? Because the children mattered more than my reputation. He met my eyes, and I saw something that took my breath away, moral conviction in a man who killed for a living. Some lines you don't cross, even in this business. I finished stitching the wound in silence, processing the implications. This man had risked everything to save children from human traffickers. Had chosen to help a federal agent rather than protect his own interests. There, I said finally, securing the bandage. Try not to get stabbed again for at least a week. I'll do my best. His hand caught mine as I pulled away, warm and steady despite everything. Thank you. For what? For not running. For helping me even after seeing what my world looks like. For. He struggled with words. For looking at me like I'm still human. Before I could respond, alarms started blaring throughout the house. Perimeter breach, one of his guards reported through an intercom. Multiple vehicles approaching. Tactical formation. Jae-woon was on his feet instantly, moving with practiced efficiency despite his injury. How many? 8 vehicles. 40+ hostiles. Mixed Russian and federal markings. They're working together, I said, understanding flooding through me. The FBI and the Bratva. Corrupt agents, Jae-woon confirmed, handing me a bulletproof vest. Morrison wasn't the only one selling information. Put this on. What's the plan? Get you out alive. He was already moving toward a hidden weapons cache, pulling out firearms with military precision. There's a boat at the private dock. My people will get you to international waters, then to whatever country you choose. New identity, new life, enough money that you'll never have to work again. What about you? I stay and fight. Buy you time to escape. His expression was resigned, almost peaceful. It's better this way. You get to live, and I don't have to watch my world destroy something beautiful. The sound of gunfire erupted outside, automatic weapons and tactical explosions that shook the house's reinforced windows. No, I said, surprising myself with the steel in my voice. Keisha. I said no. I grabbed a pistol from his weapons cache, checking the magazine with movements I'd learned from my Marine Corps brother. You don't get to make that decision for me. I'm not running while you die for something that isn't your fault. You don't understand what you're choosing. I understand perfectly. I met his eyes, letting him see my determination. You chose to save children over protecting yourself. You chose to trust me with the truth about your world. Now I'm choosing to stand with you instead of running from it. The house's main windows exploded inward as tactical teams breached from multiple points. Jae-woon's security team engaged them with professional efficiency, but we were outnumbered 4-1. Stay behind me, Jae-woon commanded, moving with lethal grace despite his injury. And whatever happens, don't try to save anyone who's shooting at us. The firefight was brutal and efficient. Jae-woon's people were better trained, but the attacking force had numbers and federal resources. As we fought our way toward the escape route, I found myself thinking not about survival, but about the man beside me, the way he protected his people, the choices he'd made, the vulnerability he'd shown me. When a sniper's bullet found its mark and Jae-woon went down, my medical training overrode every other consideration. Chest wound, right side, I assessed, applying pressure while bullets flew overhead. Punctured lung, probable internal bleeding. Leave me, he gasped. Get to the boat. Not happening. I grabbed his medical kit, working with steady hands while his security team provided cover. You saved children from trafficking. You trusted me with the truth. I'm not leaving you to die for being decent. As I stabilized his condition enough for transport, federal agents closed in on our position. But instead of continuing their assault, they hesitated. Something had changed. Stand down, came a voice over their communications. Target package secured. All teams withdraw. In the sudden quiet, I realized what had happened. They'd gotten what they came for, not us, but the evidence. The finger, the briefcase, whatever information Morrison had gathered. It's over, Jae-woon said weakly. For now. But as we evacuated to his medical facility, I knew it wasn't over. It was just beginning. Because I'd chosen his world over my safety. Because federal agents and Russian mobsters now knew I existed. Because falling in love with a Korean crime lord while his enemies wanted us both dead tends to complicate things in ways that could change everything. What happened next would test whether love could survive in a world built on violence. Whether two people from different worlds could build something stronger than the darkness trying to destroy them. And whether a nursing student from Detroit had what it took to stand beside a man whose protection meant accepting a life where danger was constant and death was always one wrong move away. The choice was mine. The consequences would be ours. Rate this script.